Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Koshie's Business Builders. I'm Cess Busby.
And I'm Adam Bubb.
And on this podcast, we talk to Australia's most innovative movers and shakers in business and life. And it's often inspiring, sometimes funny, but most of all, honest.
That's right. Welcome back, Cess. It's good to have you back in the studio after missing you last week.
People, culture and organisation are Michelle Fotheringham's bread and butter. For more than a decade, she's been helping businesses, corporations and even the government put together successful teams and find solutions to unique business problems. Well, now she's put all that know-how to good use as the co-founder of Werkling, an on-demand talent platform that lets business leaders access a pool of peer-recommended individuals to create their dream teams. Now, if you want the big picture on the future of work, Michelle's got plenty of answers, and she joins us to give us the lowdown on people, passion and purpose, and why having a people strategy is so important. Welcome.
Hello, lovely to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Michelle, it's so good to have you here with us today. In the future of work, but also in the present. Now, look, we always start with our first act icebreaker, just a question to get things moving along. If you could spend a week on a retreat with three famous people in business, entertainment, anything, who would those three people be?
Oh my goodness, that's a fabulous question. I am a little bit obsessed with the story of Netflix and listening to Mark Randolph's podcast called That Will Never Work. So I think he would definitely be one because I just get so much out of reading his books and listening to his podcast. So I think he would definitely have to be number one. Bit of a Lizzo fan. She can provide the tune, so we'll invite her along as well. And for the third, look, this is like, I cannot believe I'm sharing this, but I have a secret shame, and my secret shame is that I am obsessed with the Kardashians, which is very embarrassing. Like it's not ideal. Now, if you tell me you watch any other sort of reality TV, I will look down my nose at you. Farmer wants a wife, married. I've got no time for that. But I do have a Kardashian obsession, so I think Kim will have to come along.
I was just about to ask you which one you were going to choose because you know it's like picking your favorite baby. You know, like which one?
I know. Look, it's so embarrassing, and like I said, I'm the first to judge anyone else who watches any other reality TV, but you know, it's a bit of escapism. And yeah, I can't believe I've led with that. I think I've just lost all credibility from the outset, but there you go.
I like the Kardashians. Yes. I've met Chloe, actually.
I've met Kim. I interviewed her once, actually.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
Just casual flexing here.
In our past lives.
Yeah. Just casual name dropping. It's totally fine.
We
I'm
have
not jealous at all.
Entertainment reporter backgrounds.
That's right. Yeah, Kim doesn't. It is true that she doesn't blink. That's one secret I can reveal from having a good 10-minute conversation with her. That her eye contact is like I don't think I've met someone with eye contact like her. She stares you. She looks you down, but she kind of is. She's the master of saying. She says a lot, but doesn't say much. And that was this was like 9 or 10 years ago. You know, that was at a time where she had just first started dating Kanye. But look, this first act is not about Kim. It's about you, Michelle.
Can it be?
We'll have a special mini episode adding to there. This will be the second week in a row where the Kardashians have come up because it did on last week's podcast too. Yeah.
Oh. I mean, how can you have a conversation without the Kardashians coming up? That's the question.
Well, phenomenal businesswomen. Everything else, regardless, they're just incredible businesswomen. And their mum, incredible businesswoman. Yes.
Yeah, quite an amazing story. Anyway, we digress.
Yes, we do. Now, back to you. It's all about you today. And what I am wanting to know is, when did you realise that you had a talent for organising people and helping them to shape their purpose?
Oh, look, I guess the story behind Werkling and the moment in time that got me interested in what this future of work could look like was when I was freelancing myself, taking on a variety of projects in the people and culture space. And I looked around my network and I could see more and more people opting out of in-house traditional employment and wanting to go out on their own. And as I looked around my network, I could see that they were people that I knew were awesome. They were people who were known as high performers and top talent. Wasn't the average people, wasn't the shit people, it was the great people. And that got me really curious around the type of people who were opting out of traditional employment. And that's kind of where the Werkling journey started. I started doing a heap of research on both sides of the market, both on the talent side, so why people were choosing to work like this, and on the business side, what are the problems that are going on in relation to how we traditionally design work and we resource our organisations, and is there a better way that can enable people to do more purpose-led work?
When you go back to kind of your core purpose and building who you are today, were you always like that kind of get up and go people person and that kind of mover and shaker, challenging the status quo?
Oh, I'd probably say no. I went through a startup accelerator program last year and I felt very old, to be honest. I've just turned 40 and I've got my first startup. I think so often you hear from entrepreneurs who, at the age of 12, they had their lemonade stands and they're onto their seventh business by the time they were 18. And that's certainly not my story. I have had quite a traditional career path, moving through corporate and government organisations. I did start in marketing, but I've spent most of my career in the people and culture space. And, I suppose there's, many different paths to becoming an entrepreneur. And for me, I guess having that deep experience in how we design work, how we create people strategy for our organisation has really helped me as I start to step into this role of entrepreneur for the first time in my life and starting to look at what the future of work can look like and how I can be a contributor to that.
So you've spoken just a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey there, but let's take it right back. What was your first job and what do you think you took away from it?
My first ever job was, my very first job going all the way back was at Target. But, I like to add that I was in the music section. So if anyone, grew up working in your, retailers like your Kmarts and your Big W's, being in the music section, that's pretty cool. That had some, you got a bit of cred there. So that's going way back to my first ever job. I think what I took away from that is, I can't say that I had the best experience, with the leader, when you're a 16-year-old kid and you don't know any better, just the impact that leaders can have, whether it's in a retail context and frontline context or any organizational context, the impact that leaders can have on everyone and anyone that they work with. In terms of my first ever grown-up job, was I worked for Triathlon Victoria and I did admin. At the time when I went to university, I studied sports management, which is ridiculous in hindsight because the older I got, the less interest I had in sport. But at the time, I wanted to be the next Jerry Maguire.
And show me the money.
Yeah. It was vibing heavily on Tom Cruise. But I worked in the sports industry for a number of years, but my first ever role was at Triathlon Victoria, and that was in my last year of study. And I was like, I've got to get out there I can't wait to finish this degree before I get out in the real world and start to get some real experience. So my learning from that was I literally just asked one of my lecturers whether they knew anyone within the industry who might be open to bringing me in to provide some support or even just gain some work experience. And I guess my learning from that was if you never ask, you never know. So not being afraid to put yourself out there and ask people to make connections for you. So that's probably what I got out of my first ever role.
So, Michelle, you've since dubbed yourself a corporate escapee, which I love that term. But you were in that world for quite a while. What first drove you to enter those corporate environments?
Look, as daggy as it sounds, I was working in sports marketing, and the organisation I was working with at the time, I just had this epiphany that, people are what matters. People are the heart of any organisation, and decided to shift my career from a marketing focus to a people and culture focus, or HR at the time. When I reflect on my time in the corporate world, there was, just I learned so much and got to work with so many amazing people. I think moving from different roles in different organizations helped me just to get the breadth of experience. Corporate escapee, I think, it's a term that I love too. But I think, on the back of COVID in particular, and the last couple of years that we've had, people are wanting to design their life and their work in a different way. And that's where I'm seeing more of these corporate escapees who don't necessarily want to be owned by an organization. They don't want a traditional job. They're looking at doing work that is project based and outcome based, that plays to their strengths, and allows them to follow their purpose. So there are many fabulous things about working inside an organisation. I think, that ability to learn off others and have that kind of peer learning and peer support, to be a part of amazing teams and be real central and core to the operations of the business. But it's not for everyone. And more we're seeing people opting to different work styles.
Yeah, you just mentioned the massive shift that we've seen from people wanting to be part of that corporate lifestyle and the kind of the rat race where jobs were for life. But now, as you say, like, people want to design their jobs for their life rather than work a job and have their job be their life. So what do you think that means for businesses?
For businesses, it's about letting go of the idea of talent exclusivity. To date, we have designed our work into jobs. We advertise that job. We talk to people about that job. We choose someone, and then we offer them that job. They come and work for us and only us, and they're all ours, and they don't do anything else.
Yeah.
There's a real shift around letting go of that idea of exclusivity. Typically, our organisations, and even if you look at our people and culture functions or our talent functions, they're very focused on the employee workforce. So how can we acquire employees, retain employees, and keep them within our organisation? Organisations right now are taking a really binary view to talent. You're either internal talent, you're an employee, and you're a part of this organisation, or you're external, you're a supplier or a vendor and you're out there, you're not a part of us. But there's something amazing to be explored in that middle area. It's not an us and a them, or an internal or an external. So I think there's a huge opportunity, one, for organisations to start to reimagine what that organisation looks like. So how can we start to define what is core? What are the core capabilities that we can hold within our organisation? And then how do we start to create these benches of shared talent that not only help us to flex and augment and create more nimble organisation, but also taps into this talent pool that don't want a job, that we can't access by advertising a job. So, and that's changing the whole kind of system of how we're designing our organisation. So there's a lot that needs to happen behind that. I think, it starts with organisations really shifting away from that idea of talent exclusivity, but also the fact that all work needs to be delivered in jobs. Not all work needs to be delivered in jobs. We don't need the exact same number of people, the exact same capabilities all of the time. The needs and the work within the organisation isn't static. So how can we start to design work, yes, into some jobs for that core function of an organisation, but then also designing work into projects where you can pull in and out this amazing cohort of freelance and on-demand talent to deliver different outcomes within an organisation.
There's so much kind of dismantling of the way that we kind of know, and I guess we're sort of saying to, to the world of business, there are other ways of looking at things, and our worlds have been kind of tipped upside down over the past couple of years. This is an opportunity, and it is an opportunity, not a threat. I'm sure some see it as a threat, but it's an opportunity to reframe how we work, what we want out of work, but it's something that can actually be good for everyone. What do you see becoming even bigger trends now?
Look, we work really closely at Werkling with an amazing work futurist called Rihanna Brown. And, one thing that she's really taught me is how do you keep your eye out for those signals of change, whether they're weak signals of change or strong signals of change. Upwork did some research last year that suggested that 20% of people are considering freelance work in the future. There was research that came out a couple of weeks ago that suggests by 2028, there'll be more people working in a gig capacity than in traditional employment models. There's a growing number of people who are choosing to work in this way. We surveyed our talent within the Werkling community recently, and 90% have no intention of returning to traditional employment. So that's a cohort of people who do not want a job. In fact, there's one person in our community who has signed up to a jobs platform. He gets job emails in his inbox every Monday morning, and that's his reminder to absolutely nail his projects that he's got on in the week so he won't ever have to apply for one of those jobs. It's quite an intentional decision that people are making, and it's interesting because on the back of COVID, I was working to a bit of a hypothesis that organisations had to change in both their shape and in some cases their purpose or the product that they were delivering over the COVID time. That it was proven that organisations need to be more nimble. They need to be able to augment their workforce more. Therefore, there's going to be this moment of realisation, this grand epiphany that there is a true place for freelancers in these future work models. The other thing that's really come out of the last couple of years is people wanting purposeful work, people wanting to design their life and their work in a different way, people wanting to play to their strengths. So I think you can start to see some of those trends and some of that narrative, and that really leads more and more towards this idea of freelance and on-demand work and controlling your own destiny.
That is, there's so much to unpack here. I'm loving all of the insights you've got for us so far, Michelle. We'll be back with more from Michelle Fotheringham after this short break.
Welcome back, Michelle. Thanks for joining us again. Now,
thank you.
What I'm interested in is entrepreneurship, because I think the pandemic has really instigated a rise in entrepreneurship across Australia, and I'm wondering what you think are the qualities of a successful entrepreneur.
I think it is an obsession with the problems that they're trying to solve and not being so fixed on what the solution might look and feel like, but a continued exploration of what that problem is that they can solve, and just a willingness to put themselves out there and try something new. I mean, I'm someone who has a people and culture background, and I'm creating marketing strategies and product roadmaps and talking to investors and, all of this kind of stuff that I've never done before. So I think just a willingness to put yourself out there and be focused on that problem that you're trying to solve. I think that is what is most important. From my experience, I feel like there's a lot of noise in the kind of entrepreneurial or startup kind of ecosystem. I think it's, again, just focusing on that problem to solve and how you can add value to your customers and surrounding yourself with good people who'll help you on that journey.
Mm. And what about the difference between being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial? Because, I mean, entrepreneurial mindset is probably something we should all try to cultivate.
Absolutely. I think there are so many different ways to apply an entrepreneurial mindset other than being an entrepreneur. There's so much space within larger business, within business generally, and government organisations to be able to apply that entrepreneurial mindset, whether it's your own freelance or gig-based work. I always remember someone saying to me during the pandemic that she was starting up her own kind of side hustle from marketing. She'd been stood down by her organisation that had been dramatically affected through COVID. And she said to me, I won't find myself in this situation again where I'm reliant on one employer. I will always have something else going on now. And I think we're starting to see more of these side hustles and entrepreneurial businesses popping up because people have seen what can happen when you are reliant on this one stream of income. I think the perception of job security will change in the future. For so long, we've seen the permanent full-time job as the most secure type of employment. And to a degree, that's still true, but there's probably a lot of people that lost their jobs through 2020 and 21 that would probably disagree with that. You have others who have multiple revenue streams, who have this lovely portfolio career where maybe they're doing some consulting work over here, they've got their podcast over here, they're doing some coaching over here, they've got multiple revenue streams. Some of those taps might be turned off, but they still have other things that continue to provide their income. So that idea of income security and entrepreneurship, I think, are a little bit intertwined, and it would be interesting to see what the impact of the pandemic has had there.
So, Michelle, you mentioned like being a first-time startup founder, like you've come from that world of, going, right, you have job security and you kind of know where your next paycheck is going to come from. How do you think people can make that mental shift to going, right, I'm going to be okay with the fact that I'm going to be hustling a bit more now? Or is that something that you see with Werkling, kind of like taking the hustle out of it for the average kind of talent that you've, not just average talent, the extraordinary talent that you've got there?
Yeah, look, I'm the first to admit I come from a very privileged situation. My husband has a great job and we have, a level of financial security, and I wouldn't want to pretend that it's anything otherwise. Similar could be said for probably a lot of the people within our Werkling community. They have had the privilege of having mostly 15 to 20 years, amazing experience. They've moved into really quite senior organisations within their careers, and that's given them the ability to step out and take this risk. Yes, it's a financial risk, but it's also a personal, professional, reputational risk. So I think it's, I'm always wanting to acknowledge that it is more difficult for some people than it is for others. In terms of hustle, I'm not a hustler. I'm not a salesperson. I just believe in relationships and I believe in career karma. For me, relationships are genuine, and I'm constantly reaching out to people just to understand their views on the future of work and their views around how they flex their organisations. What are some of the pain points with traditional consulting agencies at the moment? And when they do have an extra bit of work that their team can't quite take on, where do they turn to? I just try to put the generosity out there. Whenever people reach out to me to kind of pick my brain, I'm always willing to give that back. So for me, it's about developing relationships, and that's not only in the hope that, one day there might be an opportunity to work together, but also just to put that goodwill out there and keep learning from your customers. So that's really important for me.
Because you like you said, you've got all these people with incredible experience, and that you'd be learning from them as well, and you get so much out of just being part of their network. Like you said, career karma, which is one of my favorite new phrases. I also love flex your organization. You're just dropping everything. You're like you've thought so much about this. Now, I think one of the questions we did want to kind of ask was around how is Werkling different to other talent platforms? Because somebody kind of might ask, okay, so you know what, there are part-time jobs or there are freelance, there's freelancer websites and there's like Airtasker and there's this and that. What is it that Workling does that is different?
That is a great question. There is an absolute chasm in between the way that businesses are operating today, particularly larger businesses, and some of those global talent platforms or freelance platforms like your Fivers and your Airtaskers. Businesses just do not have the trust and the faith in those platforms to tap into them for strategic type work. What I've actually found, particularly within Australia, which is where we're still focused today, is our actual competitors are consulting agencies. They're not other platforms, and they're not even yet the traditional workforce. And I think that will change over time. But right now, when organisations are needing to augment and bring in additional resources to deliver on projects or deliver on pieces of work, I've not met one person, and I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of senior leaders who are jumping on to another talent platform to find on-demand talent. So it's an area that is evolving, but it's quite low maturity right now. I think the difference that Werkling bring is, yes, it's tech enabled, but we still have a really strong relationship base. Our talent is all peer recommended. One of the early insights we got from our customer research was that when leaders do want to bring in a freelancer, they'll go to their network and try to find the person there. If they can't find the capability that they need there, they'll ask for referrals and recommendations from those that they trust. And they will blindly follow those recommendations. So there's this belief that top talent knows top talent. So how we've built our Werkling community, I literally started with the awesome freelancers and on-demand talent that I knew. And I asked them, who have you worked with before? Who would you love to work with again? And who would you put your professional name to? Tell me who those people are and connect me with them. And we've really grown our community through those referrals and recommendations. Now, the risk of that approach is it can come with a lack of diversity because you start getting a lot of like-type people. And we've had some really intentional focus and strategies around that and have built a beautifully diverse community. And not only is that community focused on accessing gigs, of course, they're here to access new and exciting opportunities that play to their strengths. But the other point of difference with Werkling is we want to reimagine what that sense of team and community look like for people who work on demand. The number one thing that we hear from people who are corporate escapees, the only thing they miss being a part of an organisation is being part of a team. So how can we start to reimagine that for this new and growing segment of the workforce? So yes, we're going to connect you with awesome gigs, but we're more than that. We don't want to be a transactional platform. We want to be a community. And what can we achieve together that is so much more than what we could achieve alone? So we're trying a whole lot of things on the community side that can help foster peer learning, connectivity, inclusion, and belonging to just be more than that transactional platform.
So do you think, because given diversity and inclusion is such a big part of the corporate world these days, and you have spent a lot of time working for corporates, did those experiences that you had in people and culture, did they help shape what you were doing when you initially did the groundwork to set Werkling up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything from my background in terms of organisation design and talent and diversity and inclusion have all kind of informed what we're building here. And I think beyond just what the future of work can look like, there's some societal problems that we can solve through our Werkling mission as well. And we don't always necessarily lead with those, but that's the broader impact we want to have. One of those is around well-being. So we design our organisations right now with a static number of people. So you might have 5 people within your comms team. Well, there's not exactly the perfect amount of work for 5 people every day of the year. We know there are peaks and troughs. What happens in those peaks is people burn out. So how can we flex our team so we're not overworking people? So there's a part of what we're doing here that it's not the whole solution, but it's a part of the solution to reduce burnout and work-related mental health issues and make more well organisations. The other piece, the other broader, I guess, societal piece is workforce participation. We've got a number of worklings who all kind of joined in a bit of a cluster towards the start of the year, who have children who are starting primary school and have additional needs. And each of these individuals said, my kids just have to come. Like, I love my career. I find it so rewarding. But for the next couple of years, I need to only work school hours. And the jobs that I have had and have had in the past are just not open to that. So what I'm going to do is turn my little side hustle freelance business into my new career path. So I think there's a real workforce participation impact here, particularly for women and women with school-age children, but of course for both genders, that traditional ways of working have never solved. I've, attempted to progress my career through part-time work. It's bloody hard. So it's kind of another reason why people are choosing to work in this different way. As I said before, I think there's continued opportunity to look at how we increase diversity into this gig and freelance-based work, because, as I said, it is a kind of a privileged starting point because people have the benefit of a 20-year career behind them before they step out into this type of work. But I think as we see future generations enter the workforce and they don't want to stick it out in an organisation for 20 years before they get to this, portfolio career, we'll start to see more diversity in the types of people who are stepping into this type of work.
Now, you talked about parenting, and it's a huge area. I think also the pandemic showed for a lot of people that look, there were some great things about working from home and with the kids around and being able to make more time for them. There's also some terrible things about it too. But you're a mum yourself. How has that changed how you look at work and even just what you want out of life and that kind of both life and work?
Yeah, one of the actual key drivers for me when I left in-house work and started doing freelance-based work was my discomfort that sat with me every time I was in the office in the city. I live in Melbourne, but I'm about 45 minutes out of the city. My husband was working in the city full-time. I was in there 3 or 4 days a week. And on those days, I just felt so uncomfortable because if one of my children broke their arm or hurt themselves at childcare, it was going to take me 45 minutes to get to them. So that was one of the driving forces for me to go, this way of working actually just isn't sitting well for me. My last in-house role that I had, I actually left. I think I was 6 months pregnant at the time. Like, there was just a values misalignment and just a recognition that the type of work wasn't right for me. When we surveyed our community recently around what their drivers were for working on demand, and I probably expected a stronger response around family and flexibility around family. And that certainly did come through strongly. But there was also quite a flavour around just purpose and your own personal well-being and living your best life. So I think it totally is a driver because we all know that the school system and the work system just do not work together. My son has his 100th day of prep tomorrow. And I said to my husband this morning, there's probably been, 7 months into like 140, 150 work days this year. And my son is just doing his 100th day of prep. So there's 40 or 50 work days that the maths doesn't quite add up. So the school system and the work system just doesn't work. So for me personally, I mean, I literally started Werkling as the pandemic started, which probably isn't, perfect timing to start a business looking at contingent labour when that's the first thing to be paused in these tough times. But, it meant that through those lockdown periods, and I'm in Melbourne, so I spent a lot of time in lockdown, there was very little else to do. So it's like kids or work, kids work, kids work, kids work. And it became really all consuming. So this year I've still haven't got it right, but trying to be a lot more intentional around work time, me time, exercise time, family time, because, that's the thing with starting your own business. Like there's a never ending list of opportunities and you're so passionate about it. So trying to kind of carve out time for other aspects of your life because it can so easily be absorbed.
How much do you think that purpose and wellness piece plays into people's decisions to jump into the gig economy? And then how do you think that is going to continue to shape the future of work?
Yeah, look, all of the research around, what is driving people is, this increased focus on being purpose-led. And like I said, our community are wanting to play to their strengths. They just want to come in and do a great job. Every now and then I'll reach out to one of our worklings and chat to them about a gig opportunity. And it's not uncommon to hear, oh yeah, I could definitely do that. But I tell you who would even do a better job. You should chat to blah, blah. Blah, blah would do an amazing job. There's this kind of generosity and people only want to do this work that absolutely plays to their strengths and that they love and fills their buckets. And that's just going to become more and more common as, the future of work unfolds. My view of the future of work is there's still going to be this more traditional structure to an organisation where you'll hold those core capabilities needed for the workforce, but then you'll have these benches of talent that you bring in and out as needed. So there's still going to be jobs for those who want jobs, but there's going to be a tipping point where we start to realise there are more and more people wanting to work in this different way, and we need some organisational structures and systems to be able to tap into them. There's a real power shift that I think we've seen more broadly over the last couple of years, particularly in this really talent scarce market. The power has flipped to being with the talent who are asking for more money, jumping ship to look for their dream job. But how that plays out in this freelance or on-demand talent side is that they can actually say no to work. The other thing I'll just mention is, you used the phrase gig economy there. And, you've probably heard me using lots of different phrases, whether it's on-demand talent or independent consultants or corporate escapees. And a part of that is because I don't think we've really landed on what we want to call these people. The problem when we talk about the gig economy is we bucket a whole host of things in there. We're talking about your delivery, Uber drivers and
Milk
your delivery.
run, yeah.
And there's a whole host of really like vulnerabilities that happen within that side of the gig economy that don't exist when you're looking at someone coming in and running an executive workshop or, doing your marketing strategy for the next couple of years. So there's really these two ends of the gig economy. And I think the conversation that happens around the, driver delivery end is so important. But we also need to recognise that they're two just very different groups within that mix. So it takes, and that's a part of why it's quite difficult to look at some of the reporting and the trends around the gig economy because the two ends get a little bit mixed up. But yeah, so I think, it'd be great to see a more nuanced conversation around the gig economy because they're just, two very different ends of the spectrum.
I think that's a really important point to make because there are so many different kinds of ways to work now, which you've spoken to us about on this podcast.
I think the thing that I love about this new way of working is it's not about casualising the workforce. These are people who have decided they don't want to work in the traditional model. So it's not something that's being inflicted on them. It's an active choice that they're making they're redesigning their life and their work. So it's a better way of working for the talent. And also it opens up this whole new world of talent and way of working for organisations. Work isn't going to become more static. There isn't going to be less change in the future. We are going to have to look at creating these more nimble organisations and tap into different types of talent to help that happen.
Michelle Fotheringham, thank you so much for sharing your first act. Now, if you want to hear more... Oh, yes, you're most welcome. Now, if you want to hear more about Werkling, head to werkling.com, and that's Werkling with an E, not an O. And to find out more about the business, just put that into Google and you'll get all the latest. And then join us next week for another fantastic first act conversation.
Thank you.